Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 21st of March. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that very easily by going to 1-800-472-0391. That's our Alaska weather information line. Of course, you can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, or if you can't find what you're looking for, give us an email. Easy place to find me is david.snyder@noaa.gov. Let's take a look at what's going on across your communities today. Wind is the issue around Valdez and Thompson Pass, where gusts could reach upwards of 80 miles per hour. Some of the stronger winds we've noted today have been in the past, and we've seen the winds coming up in the Valdez region. This is going to continue through tonight and into early tomorrow morning. Again, a high wind warning is posted for the Valdez area. Not a whole lot going on in southeast as far as watches, warnings, or advisories go, but we are expecting the wind to come up through the Lynn Canal. Storm warnings in effect there now for Juneau up toward Haines and Skagway and the White Pass region. Gusts may range anywhere from about 30 to perhaps 45-50 miles per hour up into the pass. So strong winds will be written into the forecast there as you're hearing about that, but no high wind warning posted for the region, even though it is going to be awfully gusty throughout the next 24 hours or longer there. And again, a storm warning is out for the Lynn Canal, especially the northern end. A look up north shows it's winter weather still for the northwest and western coasts of Alaska. The red is winter storm warnings there, all the way from the Chukchi coast into the Selawik Valley, across the northern parts of the Seward Peninsula, the Bering Strait region. This entire region is looking at, in general, about 3 to 5 inches of snow on the low end and about 4 to 8 on the higher end. But couple that with some wind, probably gusts on the order of 30 to 40 miles per hour. And there will be times where you probably get pretty close to, if not go all the way over to, blizzard conditions. So visibility is going to drop way down, and that probably is going to include areas generally north of Kivalina and south of Point Lay along the Chukchi coast for some really the poor visibility conditions there, as well as areas along the Bering Strait. So winter storm warnings, but kind of nearing that blizzard condition there at times. The areas in yellow will see lesser amounts of snow and not as bad visibility there. So winter weather advisories for areas around Barrow and also around the Yukon Delta. Those regions probably looking at about 2 to 4 inches of snow at times, and again, not quite as much of the poor visibility, but you will see reduction in visibility, maybe down to a half mile at times. In this entire region, there's enough warm air that the snow might be mixed in with just a little bit of ice. Not a whole lot of freezing rain, not a whole lot of sleet, but maybe just enough to notice, and the rest of that should be snow. So snow and blowing snow, poor visibility, and an awful lot of wind through this entire region over the next 24 hours there. You'll see most of these regions under those warnings through tonight and into a large part of your daytime tomorrow. Let's take a look at the weather pattern. Here's a satellite picture from earlier this afternoon. First, let's start in the east. Low pressure is sitting here across the eastern Gulf, and you can see the overall weather pattern is to move weather off of the southeast and into the Gulf. This downsloping weather pattern is bringing clouds through your region, but not a whole lot of precipitation at this point. And a lot of dry air is being pulled into the southwest and also across the central and western Gulf. We're also getting a big change in the weather pattern. This very deep southerly flow is pushing that warm and wet air northward, and you can see that just flying by here across the central and western part of the chain. A wave of low pressure here just south of Shemya will continue working its way northward, and as it does so, that is latching onto a lot of the heat and moisture down south and just shoving that up across the Bering Strait and into the Chukchi Sea, helping to create snowfall and wind across our western communities. In the middle is more of a northerly flow coming through the midsections of Alaska and down through south central. It's finding ways to push that air through the gaps and the nooks and crannies of the earth, and in places like Valdez and Thompson Pass, it's becoming pretty windy. Winds will continue to come up around the Palmer area as well as the Matanuska Valley, and winds are coming up and have been across the Lynn Canal, parts of Juneau, Haines, Skagway, and up through White Pass. So this is the kind of weather situation where the windows may rattle a little bit for you in those communities. Overall, it's been a pretty dry period for the middle Tanana Valley and south central and southwest, but gradually, as the weather pattern shifts, we'll probably get back into at least an opportunity for some light snow across south central and the interior, and eventually southeast. But for right now, the main focus is the development of that winter weather across the west, and you can see already out around Wales, out toward Dehne, St. Lawrence Island, periods of moderate to occasionally heavy snow there, even as high pressure is just off to your east. That's really helping to channel that strong southerly flow eastward. And you can see the development of the low here at 982 millibars by tonight. The crossed arrows mean blowing snow and reduction in visibility there. And remember, that could reach near zero at times for the Chukchi Coast into the Kotzebue Sound region, Seward Peninsula, and out toward St. Lawrence Island. We do think that we're going to see some rain across the central chain as that moves eastward. You're going to see the winds come up across the central and eastern islands there as well. Notice the vast area that's under generally cloud-free conditions, or at least mainly clear sky as we go through tonight, all the way from Fort Yukon and the upper Yukon Valley down towards southwest, Lake Iliamna, Kodiak Island, Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula, and really most of southeast will be dealing with at least partly cloudy conditions, if not generally clear. Areas of light snow and rain probably linger across the southern parts of the archipelago, but other than that, it looks typically dry. Low pressure is going to be holding just offshore of the Dixon entrance region at 992 millibars, but that trough that extends up to the north is what's going to be helping to guide a lot of that air through White Pass and through the Lynn Canal and into Juneau, Haines, and Skagway. Around Valdez, it's still going to be a blustery day, especially in the morning tomorrow before that pressure gradient relaxes just a little bit more. And then out across the west, 964 millibar low is what we have just south of Russia's Gulf of Anadyr. And as that colder air punches across into the west coast, the pressure gradient here, which is driving the wind flow, will squeeze just a little bit more, making the winds flow just a little bit faster. And we keep those nearly blizzard conditions across the western tip of the Seward Peninsula, the south-facing coast of the Seward Peninsula itself. That's going to include Nome, and then up toward the Chukchi Coast in the Kotzebue Sound region, where snow and blowing snow will be set probably for most of the day. As this progresses northward throughout the day, we're going to see that snow and visibility change up here across the Arctic coast. Because of that, those winter weather advisories are posted for communities around Barrow and eastward. You will see snow and perhaps some blowing snow, but it doesn't look like we'll see the worst of conditions across most of the Beaufort Seacoast. As we get into Friday, the front is now kind of wrapped up on itself here, the warm and the cold air mixing in together. The front's going to start to fall apart. It's weakening substantially already as it gets into west and southwestern Alaska, and really falling apart as it moves into the western Gulf. But we already have another system right behind that. That's moving into the western chain. So for Friday, periods of snow and snow mixed with rain for places like Adak and Atka, all the way out toward Attu, probably Kiska. And there's a little ribbon of precipitation that develops across central and southern parts of southeast, probably rain mixed with snow here. But most of the interior along the Alcan, Prince William Sound, and still the Kenai Peninsula, even into Anchorage, still looking not only dry, but pretty much clear. The front, again, though, is falling apart, so everything that we see behind it is already weakening substantially. There will be areas of snow and some probably some blustery winds, but that will fall apart very quickly as we get into Friday night and into Saturday. But do watch for some blowing snow up around the Beaufort Seacoast, and that will continue across some parts of the Arctic coast, Kotzebue Sound, north of the Yukon Delta, where there will still be snow and still some blustery conditions, but it will kind of pull back a little bit, I think, into areas closer to the low in eastern Siberia. Here's a look at temperatures for your Thursday morning. Southeast, we're looking at lows in the upper 20s and low 30s. Teens and 20s for South Central, 28 in Kodiak. In the middle Tanana Valley, about 2 below. Around Fairbanks, anywhere from 10 to 15 below up north. And then milder for the west as clouds and wind are stirring up the air and keeping things a little bit on the warmer side. 21 in Nome, 24 for Nunivak Island around Meteorologists, and 33 in St. Paul with upper 30s to even mid-30s around the chain in the Alaska Peninsula. High temperatures for your Thursday, probably back in the lower 40s from Bristol Bay all the way back to the west. Upper 30s around St. Paul and St. George, 34 in Savunga, about 30 degrees or so in Nome, 11 in Barrow, 0 in Kaktovik. Fairbanks, you're looking at temps in the upper 20s with Ambler and Bettles in the upper teens to about low 20s. Just above freezing for many in South Central, including Anchorage, Palmer, and Wasilla, 40 in Kodiak. Southeast looking at lows in the mid to upper 40s. Sitka could be as warm as 46, with a low back in the upper 20s and low 30s for Friday morning. South Central, teens and 20s. Kodiak just shy of freezing, 4 in Fairbanks, 1 in Barrow. Nome looking at 19, Kotzebue about 16. King Salmon and Dillingham, upper teens to low 20s and 30s mainly for the chain and the Alaska Peninsula. High temperatures on Friday back in the single digits for Kaktovik and points westward, Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse. 12 in Barrow, 18 in Wainwright. Shishmaref looking at about 27 degrees, 26 in Nome. Galena about 27, McGrath a little bit milder, and South Central looking for highs in the lower to mid 30s there, with Southeast upper 30s to low 40s. Kodiak Island looking for a high of 40 on Friday, and upper 30s and low 40s for the Alaska Peninsula all the way out toward the chain.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On the aviation weather now, IFR conditions will spread into Norton Sound and Kotzebue Sound up into the western parts of the Brooks Range and the Kobuk and Noatak valleys there as low pressure deepens up around the Gulf of Anadyr. This will become the predominant source of our very active weather period across most of Alaska. Look for lingering MVFR across the middle and upper Tanana valleys as well as the upper Yukon Valley, but pretty clear sailing and good ceilings there for most of southeast and south central Alaska, but turbulence may still be an issue where you are. Thursday afternoon, IFR conditions continue to work their way eastward across the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island into the Yukon Delta, and just shy of the Kuskokwim Delta, but MVFR will be there. And look for IFR conditions around Sandpoint and points westward all the way to the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula, and marginal areas across extreme southern parts of southeast. Look for eastern areas of the Brooks Range to see a little bit of MVFR. As we get into Friday morning, IFR starts to develop just south and east of Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, generally north and west of Fort Yukon. MVFR should be limited across the upper Tanana Valley, and look for a little bit of MVFR south of Sitka to Port Alexander all the way down into the Clarence Strait region out into the Gulf. The main issues along the west coast will be IFR from Norton Sound all the way into Bristol Bay and parts of the Alaska Peninsula from Pilot Point to about Port Hayden. Out to the west, MVFR conditions spreading in behind low pressure now as that continues to work its way north and east. We'll get more of a westerly flow working into the central and western Bering with IFR conditions across the western chain for your Friday afternoon. Obviously, most of the state will be looking at pretty good conditions for sealing and visibility. MVFR, though, will linger across parts of the upper Kuskokwim and areas around and just west of Lake Iliamna, while south central and most of the interior and most of southeast, for that matter, should be A-OK. Here's a look at your pass conditions for Thursday now. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions there. Things should be pretty good, maybe a little breezy at times. Through Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, watch for VFR conditions for all of your Thursday, and for Rainy Pass, things looking pretty good there. Windy Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions there in the morning, but some improvement noted throughout the afternoon to VFR. Same goes for Isabel Pass, looking for marginal ceilings and visibility in the morning, but improvement to be had there. Mentasta Pass, on the other hand, across the eastern Alaska Range may still have some lingering IFR. Now, it is possible that some of this may shift to just a little bit east of the pass, so you might end up waking up to pretty good conditions there. But there's a risk that some of this may be IFR in the morning. So at worst, we'll show it this way, but it does look like no matter what happens, you'll at least get to MVFR by midday and perhaps the afternoon, and perhaps even better to VFR. Tanita Pass does look to achieve that. VFR conditions expected for Thursday, and for Portage Pass, Chilkoot and White Pass also expected to see VFR flying for your Thursday. On to freezing levels now, and with a large area of low pressure out across the western Bering, no surprise that that deep southerly flow is sending warm and wet air northward through the Bering Strait and into the Arctic. And you can see the 2,000-foot freezing levels aloft north of the Bering Strait into the Chukchi Sea. Here's the surface freezing line, and anytime we see those layers cross over, it should be a warning sign, especially to aviation. We could have some overrunning here, so I want to keep in mind that this layer of warm air over that surface freezing line means that any precipitation in this area here has the potential of being freezing rain, perhaps some sleet. But we know that something's not kind of in that normal setup here, so keep that in mind if you're flying out around the western end of the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula, western Norton Sound, and maybe even up around Point Hope and Point Lay. Those areas there will have that potential of seeing some type of mixed precipitation, not just rain and not just snow. Here's a look at Thursday now, and you can see that icing potential is there. It's pretty high up, above about 8,000 feet for your normal type of aviation icing. So that's going to be pretty high up there, and you can see it gets even higher as you head further south across the peninsula and west of St. Matthew, all above 10,000 feet. Same goes for the Beaufort Seacoast, and for southeast, it's going to be below 10,000 feet. There is some deep moisture lingering here, but it is fairly limited to extreme southern parts of southeast. The jet stream now shows our wacky pattern, high pressure and a block pattern across most of Alaska with this omega shape here. We have active weather in the Gulf and active weather out in the west, and pretty fast moving speeds there. So here's our high pressure ridge across the interior and a deep south and westerly flow for the west coast and offshore flow for southeast. Interior wind speeds around 20 to 30 knots. And at 3,000 feet, a much more broader west and southerly flow across mainland Alaska. And here's our deep easterly flow continuing across southeast. So what does that mean for turbulence? Let's take a look. Across the west, we're going to be watching for some considerable moderate, maybe isolated severe across St. Lawrence Island below 4,000 feet. Considerable moderate for the chain, for the west coast, all below 4,000 feet. Watching for areas to improve around Valdez, that's below 8,000 feet, and moderate across northern parts of southeast. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider, and joining me again is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. Thanks again for joining us, Cindy.
Thanks for having me back, Dave.
Sure thing. And I love saying Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska's National Weather Service because that's not weather. Why is the Tsunami Program part of the National Weather Service?
Well, it's because the Weather Service absolutely rocks at warning people for every kind of, devastating natural hazard.
Mm-hmm. The mission of the Weather Service is to protect life and property. And so how does the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, which is a very unique office, again, within the Weather Service, it's not weather, how do those folks help us protect life and property?
The National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer is a national warning center, and we analyze seismic traces 24/7 all around the world. So when there's an earthquake anywhere on the planet, we see it and analyze it within minutes.
Within minutes, and there's actually a goal to have it under, was it 5 minutes?
If there is a tsunami warning to be issued for continental America, yeah, we must get that out, or shoot to get that out in 5 minutes.
Okay. Now that's not something I have ever learned to do, so I know it would be a struggle for me to do that under probably hours, but it is fascinating to watch, and the office is open on a regular basis for tours, right?
Absolutely. Come by Friday.
Okay.
Yep, every Friday at 1, 2, and 3 p.m. They're open public free tours. And it's the most interesting place on the planet. You really should check it out.
Okay, and the office team is made up of people that are earth scientists, not meteorologists or atmospheric scientists. Talk about some of the types of people that work there.
Right, we are out of place in our National Weather Service, but yeah, we are geologists, geophysicists, oceanographers. We even have an astrophysicist on board, computer software architects, electronic technicians that are brilliant and innovative. Our software is all written in-house. Our instrumentation is designed in-house. So it's a really, really unique place, and it's just a couple handfuls of people that work there. So
sure,
yeah.
One of my favorite ways to get a tsunami alert message is on Twitter.
Right.
And I can follow the Twitter address, and we'll put that up on the screen for you there. But it's usually a very quick message that tells you initially what the magnitude of an earthquake could be and about where its epicenter was. What are some of the other ways that you can get that alert message?
Well, Twitter's my favorite too.
Yeah.
And you don't even need a Twitter account to receive it. So it
right.
just comes in like an SMS message. But you can also receive it via email, weather radio, of course, the crawler on your television screen, on the internet, Google Alerts.
Right.
Marine radio if you're out in harbors and boats. Actually, marine radio is probably,
yeah, it is a good one.
That's our partnership with the Coast Guard. We're really grateful for that, absolutely. But there's a variety of ways in dissemination.
Okay.
And locally, excuse me, I'm sorry, but locally in the communities, the sirens will go off as well.
Right. So lots of different ways to get that very important message very quickly when that matters to you. One of the ways that the Warning Center practices with communities is a test on a yearly basis, right?
Right.
How does that work?
Thanks for bringing that up. It's a controversial issue, but it's super important to help us warn better and really serve Alaskans. So the week of March 27th, the commemoration of the 1964 event, for that week we have a Tsunami Preparedness Week every year, we like communities to get out and do drills and practice and do everything we can to raise awareness. And part of that is a live code test where we actually issue the warning message live and we activate the emergency alert system, which means sirens go off, the TV crawler happens, and it's a test.
We're doing everything that would normally happen without the real threat of the tsunami, just to practice as much as possible.
Right, and this is a major partnership with the State of Alaska, Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, the Emergency Operations Center, and the Alaska Broadcasters Association. Without the media, we wouldn't be able to do this. So the three groups really work tightly together to do our best to warn, educate the public that this is happening so they don't wonder and get scared about it. It has been remarkable what we've learned. I mean, it pretty much breaks somewhere every time, but then we fix it and it gets better. So a quick example is just a few years ago, we used to, when we issued a message, it would activate the entire state. Right? I mean, Kotzebue, Nome, Bethel, everybody would be in tsunami warning. And so now we can regionalize it to where the actual event is taking place. That's pretty huge.
So identifying points of failure and also points of success and making sure we continue down that successful path so that folks are warned as quickly and accurately as possible.
Absolutely. And, you know, to get our communities involved to prep themselves, prep their businesses, prep their tourism, prep their schools, you know, just make this an annual thing they need to be doing.
So as citizens wanting to be prepared, we should be prepared to learn more about that test that's happening usually toward the end of March every year.
And you should be happy that it's happening. Instead of upset. Definitely be happy that it's happening.
Just as we test tornado sirens in tornado country, we also have to test the tsunami program as well.
Because there isn't enough time. You know, for a local tsunami, the wave will arrive in less than 2 minutes. So it's super important that people know what to do.
Very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for helping us know more about the Tsunami Ready program and the test. And the Tsunami Warning Center is a very unique and very important job in the National Weather Service that is just fascinating to me every time I visit the office. So.
It's the only one for the continent. You really should come check it out.
It's an international effort.
Yes.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
And thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice edge. On this 21st of March, you'll notice that the leading edge of ice is starting to work its way northward once again. With south winds and warmer air moving in, that southern edge will be eroded. Watch for continued changes on north-facing coastlines like around Nunivak Island and the Yukon Delta and around St. Lawrence Island. As that ice edge continues to move northward, you'll see some greater changes along some of those coastlines. Let's look at southeast now. With a strong pressure gradient through the Lynn Canal, storm force winds are expected, sustained up to 50 knots, gusts to 65 out of the north. Stevens Passage will also get pretty windy there at 40 knots. Look for seas from 4 to 10 feet, the highest, of course, in Lynn Canal, and you can also see some of the gap wind effects reaching out into the Gulf there with northeasterlies at 40 to 45. Gales will be prevalent for many communities. Northerlies continue on Friday through the Lynn Canal. The winds subside just a bit, 30 knots with a gust to 45. Northeasterlies through Stevens Passage, and a much calmer day down around Clarence Strait, 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. North and easterly winds continue across the outer coast, 15 to 20 knots with about 4 to 6-foot seas in the region. For South Central, a windier day on Thursday. Northerlies around Prince William Sound, gusts to 50 out of the Copper River Delta, 25 knots sustained, but a considerable higher gust is possible. 7-foot seas expected all the way around into the Barrens, where we get into 10 to 13-foot seas, and northerlies coming down over Cook Inlet with gusts to 35 once you get south of Kenai toward the western Barrens. Friday looks like a much calmer day. The strongest winds will be over the Barren Islands from the north and west, about 5-foot seas expected there, otherwise 2 to 4-foot seas across the region, with 10-knot winds generally out of the north. For Thursday across Bristol Bay, look for an easterly flow, 20 knots and 3-foot seas. Higher seas as you move down the coast. Look for northerlies crossing over Kodiak Island, 25 knots with 12-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait. By Friday, it's a 5-foot sea with more of a westerly, gentle flow moving across the region. 15 to 20 knots across the Bering Sea coast, 5-foot seas inside of Bristol Bay, 9-foot seas down the coast, and as you can see, higher seas are found out across the central Bering. So let's take a look there. Southerlies north of Unalaska, Nikolsky as we head into tomorrow, 40 knots with an 11-foot sea coming out of the south. West and southwesterly winds are expected for the rest of the chain. You're looking at 13 to 17-foot seas across the Pacific, anywhere from about 14 to 17-foot seas through the Bering Sea coast region. And again, the higher seas generally north and west of the Pribilofs. As we get into Friday, that subsides just a little bit. For the Bering Sea coast, we're looking at about 11 to 14-foot seas. A south and westerly wind will be the predominant flow, 20 to 30 knots, 35 knots from Adak out toward Kiska. And for the Pacific coast, anywhere from 15 to 25, you're expecting 9 to 12-foot seas as you get into Friday afternoon. For Thursday along the west coast, a much stronger wind out here around St. Lawrence Island to St. Matthew and around the Pribilofs, 45 knots there. Storm force winds will continue to be an issue around St. Matthew. Southerlies blowing there with 27-foot seas. Anywhere from 11 to 14-foot seas on either side of Nunivak Island, and southeasterlies around St. Lawrence Island could reach up to 50 knots over the ice. That diminishes to 30 knots by Friday. A south and westerly flow also subsiding somewhat south of Nunivak Island out toward the Pribilofs with 20 to 30 knots, and 16 to 20-foot seas are expected between St. Matthew and the Pribilofs for your Friday. For the Beaufort Sea coast, 20 to 30 knots are expected there, blowing in from the east. That could move some snow around and again reduce visibility. Winter weather advisories are now posted there. And south and easterly winds for the Chukchi coast, anywhere from 30 to 40 knots over the ice. And remember, the strongest winds will be around St. Lawrence Island toward the Bering Strait region. That subsides and improves on Friday, still looking at 20 to 25 knots for the Chukchi coast and 25 to 30 knots for the Beaufort Sea coast. East and southeasterly winds will continue for your Friday. Recapping tonight's weather, winter weather advisories now have been added to the Beaufort Sea coast as we go through your Thursday and into Friday there. Lowered visibility expected, and winter storm warnings down most of the western coast. Winter weather advisory for the Yukon Delta. Many communities in the west will see lowered ceilings, periods of heavy snow, as much as 4 to 8 inches in some areas there under the winter storm warning. Maybe just a scant bit of ice mixed in there. And visibility may drop to near zero in a few places. And again, that will be approaching blizzard levels. So plan and travel carefully. As westerly winds push a cold front into the west coast by Thursday, the strongest winds will move up the western coast. We'll also see some strong winds through Haines, Skagway, Juneau, and into White Pass. So plan travel carefully there, and don't be surprised if you have some disruptions. As the front moves inland, by Friday it will start to fall apart. The winds will die down, the snow will start to let up a little bit, but blowing snow may still affect parts of the Beaufort Sea coast. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.